All right, welcome to the Precision Protocol series brought to you by Biocanic. In this series, we nerd out in the world of personalized health, functional medicine, clinical research, and cutting-edge wellness strategies. We explore the advanced science, clinical applications, and the real-world impact of precision protocols designed to optimize client outcomes. This episode, we're going to deep dive into the toxic traits. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching so you never miss an episode. I'm Jeremy, the CEO and co-founder of Biocanic, and I'm joined by my very brilliant co-host, Brendan Vermeire. And today we're pleased to welcome Sinclair Kennally from Detox Nation and Toxins University. Welcome, Sinclair. Uh-oh, you're on mute. Uh-oh. Can you not hear me? Uh-oh.
Can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Really? We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Speakers turned up.
I can hear you just fine when we were in the green room.
Uh-oh.
Oh, you just cut in and out a little bit.
Okay. Do you hear me now? Awesome. Well, listen.
Okay, I'll come in and come out.
Okay, cool. All right. So, Brendan, you are the OG of mold testing. I realized that the other day is that when we built Biocanic, one of the first tests that we built, I think for you, was the mycotox. So, because I think you were one of the original FDNs that was actually looking into toxins. Maybe just get that background and kind of why you started there.
Yeah, it's kind of thank you for the kind words. I don't really consider myself an OG, but it is a little wild because I think the whole mold illness, mycotoxin surge and even just awareness, like I feel like that was around kind of 2017, 2018, 2019, and then it was like the topic of the year in our functional medicine industry. But I think water damage is so pervasive across America, and obviously the CDC just released that paper the other day about like, maybe mysterious fungal infection is a bigger issue than we really realize. But like, we have so much more research to go, but certainly looking at the accelerating toxic burden and its implications for human health at large. And so I'm super excited to dive in this topic a little bit deeper with Sinclair and see your data as well somewhere in there.
Yeah. So now that you can hear us, Sinclair, why don't you just do a quick intro for those that don't know you and maybe just introduce Toxins University specifically and how it's kind of the first of its kind program for practitioners.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. This is so fun. I love to nerd out with you guys. So I am a traditional naturopath, a CNHP, and I came about all this stuff the hard way. Unfortunately, I was already in practice and became too sick to do my work, and we had to go back to the drawing board and figure out what had gone wrong with my health. And it certainly eluded the medical, like the allopathic model, and also the natural health practitioners, and even all the naturopaths that I went to see for many years. So we went back to root cause school, whether we wanted to or not, my husband and I, and he was also chronically ill, but looked totally different. And for us, the light bulb came on when we realized, although our presentations and our diagnoses were totally different, the root causes were the same. It was mold toxicity, it was heavy metals, it was, some stress and trauma thrown in just for fun, a few chemicals, some EMF wiring issues in our home were really exacerbating the problem while we slept. And fixing those things layers by layer really helped us actually tackle this. Of course, there were pathogens involved because what health journey is complete without parasites in this day and age, right?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe kind of peeling back the end on the approach. I mean, most people watching us are practitioners or health motivated individuals.
Yeah.
And, people are with the rise of functional health, comprehensive blood work, and, there's a lot more testing happening. And the mold and toxins conversation is starting to bubble up. But I'd love you to kind of talk about how you somebody comes to you with a mystery illness. How do you think about it? What is your approach? And then, how are you kind of guiding people through that process?
Yeah, so lucky for us, we got to mentor with some bioregulatory medicine pioneers who really were teaching us about the terrain versus, is it only genes, or is it only, somebody's health history? Is it germs? Like what is the paradigm that we are going to really commit ourselves to that actually creates, long-term resolution for complex mystery chronic illness people? And, terrain theory has really proven out in one for us. So this is the thought process of like, we're not afraid of the one germ that's floating by in the air. And we don't ask the goldfish that's sick, like, what's wrong with your genes? We say, oh, the first thing we know when a goldfish is sick, like, oh, check the water. If the goldfish has a weird tumor, definitely check the water. Oh, if the goldfish dies, oops, is there something wrong with the water? And if you switch out the water, does the goldfish get better? Like that is step one when you're taking care of a goldfish. And that's also step one in our root cause resolution framework. It's what we teach in Toxin University. It's very like bioregulatory medicine, homotoxicology informed, but really updated for the stressors and needs of today. So we obsess about the environment, obsess about the nervous system, and then of course obsess about somebody's capacity to heal from there. So getting out of that diagnosis paradigm and looking instead at like what were the original root cause stressors and disruptors to the body's own healing strategies.
And so how do you go about identifying those? Like, what do you particularly use? What's the approach? I know there's a couple different modalities and testing, so it'd be great to just hear what those things are.
Yeah, we nerd out about labs hardcore. And we always say the labs tell the story and the meters tell the story. So we're looking at, we love the Total Tox labs from Vibrant. There's many other laboratories like looking at like how can they also support this toxic, conversation and help us measure toxicants effectively. But we're also getting into the environment as fast as possible. So, love to see a good gut test. Love to see, like a gut zoomer or a neural zoomer when warranted. Lyme and co-infections may play a role, but the thing that for us is a non-negotiable actually is the tox labs. We don't wait to do them. To every case that comes our way has some kind of toxic exposures in it because we're all drinking water, we're all breathing air, and we've all had some food from time to time. And most of us live in a building, so there's some toxic exposures involved. Yeah.
I'm curious, Total Tox is kind of one of your staple standard labs. Are you doing a lot of blood work with that too, out of curiosity?
Yeah, we'll just do a normal CBC, that's easy enough. But I love to get into the gut zoomer as fast as possible too. And, to Jeremy's point, like we were looking early on, like we were some of the first people to like get people to get their EMF meters out and start doing like air quality testing as well, because the meters will tell the story. So a lot of people don't realize this, but like, you can obsess about inflammatory markers in blood work all day long and say, oh my gosh, your CRP is elevated, but then you still have to ask the question, why? So along with, really in-depth health history where we're not just looking at what your health symptoms have been and what, mom and dad went through health wise. We're looking so much more at like, what are the different buildings you lived in? Like, what was the onset of your illness and where were you living at the time? What is your earliest memory of not feeling well? And if it was childhood asthma, I want to know all about that farm that you grew up on and how you used to play in the moldy haylofts and how that's when it all started. Because a child that gets exposed to, mold is often going to get that early DX of childhood asthma that they'll often grow out of, but that mold is also going to impact the way their liver matures. And so then we have other fun data to play around with too. So some of it is quantitative. That's very easy to run a lab on, but a lot of it is just legwork and footwork of, the health history and where they lived. And of course, dental history needs to play a really important role here because, ongoing infections are not usually noticed early on. And so we also always ask for a 3D cone beam scan whenever there are energy issues. We want to know right away if you have cavitations or other silent infections in the mouth that have been overlooked because it's so rare to actually get like an abscess or like a local tooth pain. Like it has to be in a state of crisis for that to happen, but can absolutely be affecting the immune system, and your body's ability to just make energy, just to have that slow leak of infection down into the circulatory system and your lymphatics and all that, So it's fun.
Mm-hmm. Do you provocate? Do you like provocating before doing the urine sample?
That's a great question. That should depend on the lab, actually, and their reference ranges. So, for example, we never encourage people to provoke before running vibrant labs because their reference ranges were created without provoking. So, we want apples to apples.
Mhm.
So, yeah, great question.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And, one of the things, if we're going to nerd out today, which I know we are because we're talking to practitioners, something that's important to remember when we're looking at like these environmental root causes
Mhm.
is a urine test is awesome at letting you know what the body's in a position to excrete. But that's all it's doing is letting you know what can the body let go of. So I'm not looking at the total tox bundle going, oh, you're low in mercury. Great. That's not a problem. I don't have to think about heavy metals anymore. All the heavy metals are in the green. You have BPA though, and glyphosate. So you got a little plastic, a little bit of herbicide, and then you have like one or two molds. Let's check your environment. We have to be thinking much more intentionally here. This is only about what your body can let go of right now. So I also like to pair it with scans whenever possible, like for example, the dental cone beam scan, but also like the oligo scan is surprisingly helpful to look at people's state of mineralization. What are they actually depleted in the tissues? Not just what minerals are looking good on your blood work, right? And also heavy metals, of course. So what heavy metals are tucked away in there that we need to just be aware of and intentional about. So many functional medicine practitioners really mean well, and they know we're living in a toxic world, and they want to account for it in their protocols, but they're accidentally pushing people too fast to get heavy metals out, for example, before prep work has been done. And they don't even know they're doing it because they're not measuring for them properly, you know? So it's a trip.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm glad to hear you say that about the excretion because like that I had 3 total tox consults today and I kind of have my spiel and I'm always trying to explain that of like something I'm really fervently passionate about is kind of separating like okay, these biomarkers have established clinical significance, this test is exploratory, it doesn't have any established clinical significance, right? It's like how many toxins were excreted by the body into the urine tells us virtually nothing about their current state of physiology. By like what you said too, of like, okay, if we have a single elevated C-reactive protein with a 48-hour half-life, that tells us we have acute inflammation at that moment in time to some degree, but we have no idea why, right? So I'm always kind of preaching of like, we have to assess the physiology and also test for the presence of something that might be dysregulating the physiology. And I feel like that's such a big disconnect because I don't know if
Yeah.
it's maybe not intuitive, right? Because like we can't look at, urine mycotoxins and be like, oh, you have SIRS and mold illness. Like it's, well, that's what's coming out. Where did it come from, right? So I'm curious, like, because I imagine you've looked at a large volume of total tox results. I'm curious, how often do you feel it's helpful to retest the urine excretion, and what are you seeing with like correlation of symptoms or biomarkers in relation? Because like I think intuitively we want to think like, oh, if I reduce the toxin levels in the urine, that equals better clinical output, but that's not necessarily true. Maybe they're just excreting more, right? So I'm just kind of curious what you're seeing.
Yeah, I don't recommend doing it too often because first
Mm,
of all, if you're doing your job as a practitioner and you're meeting the person where they're at and not just treating the lab but supporting the whole person through this process, you're not just trying to shove them through a detox as fast as possible. You're trying to really account for what are the lifestyle habits that are contributing to their health issues? What is the environment doing that's impacting them that's an ongoing exposure that's depleting? And that's circadian as well as just like it's not all about mold. It's also about the lighting that they choose. It's the habits that they have in the evenings. Do they know how to wind down? Do they have any sleep hygiene left? Or is it all gone? Are they doing any work at all to reduce their EMFs and just so they have the capacity to rest deeply while they sleep? So this isn't just about like how fast can I get them onto a binder and shove some liver support down their throat. So there's often like an onboarding process where we're trying to mentally get them into a whole new a whole new lifestyle, really, if we're doing our jobs right. So there's some food guidance. We call that food filters because we want to account for bioindividuality, of course. So we don't ascribe to any specific single diet. I mean, of course, Michael does. My husband, he's basically a carnivore, but he's type O blood, so he can live on 2 steaks a day. And he's like, is there any other kind of food? Who cares? But if you're really doing your job, and putting toxins in their proper context, we're upregulating mitochondrial support, we're doing nervous system support, we're accounting for food, and we're de-escalating inflammation coming in through food, and doing some lifestyle shifts, right? And then easing into detox via drainage and binders, and then going after overgrowth and parasites and all that stuff. So there's no point in retesting total tox within 90 days at all. And really, if you're doing your job, you're going to see, if you did do that, you're going to see an increase short term of what people are in a position to excrete, because that's all we're measuring here. What are people in a position to excrete? So they're becoming better excretors with all the decisions you're helping them make and all the shifts they're making. They're reducing inflammation because of all these lifestyle shifts, and they're increasing energy, right, and capacity and output, and you're supporting those detox pathways to get more efficient. So great. No point in spending several $100s on a total tox, unless you want to prove to them that they're getting out more. And sometimes we do have like engineers. I love working with engineers because their spreadsheets, man, and their little AI agents that they build around this crap, it's hilarious. And of course they want to do it like every month. There's no point in that. I don't recommend anybody doing it before 4 months, and I'm happy to let them wait 6 months, because the bigger the drop, the better. And I want them to be able to track for themselves via the symptomology, which is all they really care about anyway. Are you feeling better? Are you getting more resilient? Or are you tackling this in a way that feels doable for you?
Mm-hmm.
How about you? What do you like to do?
I'm recognizing I kind of asked like a very specific question. I like how you backed up and zoomed out, because I feel like I'm pretty obsessed with lab testing and science, but the deeper I get into it, the more I realize how imperfect it is. And so it kind of brings me back to, the clinical critical thinking and being an effective detective or coach or whatever of, if there's so much obvious room for improvement with lifestyle foundations and environmental intervention foundations, like that's always going to be the crux of it. Something that I see a lot in my practice is, because I have kind of the mental health focus, I do get a lot of anxiety and OCD and a lot of health anxiety, a lot of kind of hypochondriasis behavior where, sometimes the, scary looking toxins on a lab result like do more harm than good, because it can kind of manifest anxiety and a nocebo response. And like we established, it's like, well, the toxin levels really have nothing, like how much came out has no bearing on your current state of physiology per se. So we don't want to use that like exploratory data to build a fear-inducing narrative that you start identifying with, right? So I just try to use that, being very pragmatic and strategic with when is it appropriate to run that test or not. But I like how you're saying, well, there's not really any point within the first like 3+ months, because I remember back in the day, like when the SIRS model was getting really popular. I mean, I remember hearing some doctors, they were doing like urine mycotoxin testing like every single week just to kind of like
I know, that's just crazy work, man.
That's a lot of money to pee in a cup.
Yeah, who's got the budget for that? That's crazy. Yeah, I really appreciate you calling that out, actually, Brendan, because we're all here to make friends. I'm sorry, I don't want to disparage anybody's approach. It's just this has to be, client-centered or patient-centered. And I think it's really important what you called out about the nocebo response. Like a central metaphor that we use in Toxin University as we're teaching practitioners how to work through these toxicant exposures is we're going treasure hunting. This is not a shame game of like, hey, you've been eating out of styrofoam, how dare you? Or, oh my God, you grew up on Kraft macaroni and cheese, and then you starved yourself for 20 years, and lived on Slim Fast. And now, of course, your liver shut down because you basically lived on whey protein and maltodextrin, like, of course, you're not going to feel good and it's going to show up in the lab work. But we don't want to teach you to be afraid of your food, air, and water. That's not great for the nervous system either. So instead, we talk about it like we're treasure hunting for what are the overlooked blocks to healing. Because you're only in my office because you've already tried stuff that hasn't worked and you want to get back into being able to trust your body. And we think the body doesn't make mistakes. It's not possible for it to. When you really look at physiology and the more we understand about the body now, which, let's be real, most of the tools that we're using are really in their nascency. So we want to have lots of curiosity and be very willing to say, like, it's a layer of information. It's not everything. It's a layer of information. From here, we want to say, okay, how you feel is the most important thing. And your body knows how to heal, and it is already healing or you'd be dead. So let's just start with those premises and let's take the fear out of this and look for what are the overlooked blocks to healing? What do we miss? Is it a dental infection from that cone beam scan? Can we see that now? Or is it mold? That's okay. Was it past mold? Is it current mold? That's going to be a great, era of exploration for us. Let's just go treasure hunting.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a good time to bring up a case study that you're very familiar with. For those of you that don't follow my wife on Instagram, we're dealing with mold issue in the home. So I thought it'd be good. So I pulled together I have, of course, all my data uploaded into Biocanic. So the prompt that I asked it to review is review the toxin and blood chemistry results from the last month alongside of the tracker. So my wearable data, correlated with the genetic SNPs from MaxGen. Also consider environment for this client lives in zip code 92109, identify patterns and correlations, and to review it and suggest supplement recommendations. So Sinclair, you're obviously familiar with it, very familiar with it. But I thought it would be kind of good for you to kind of talk through how you think about things. So we're considering the genetic potential, we're considering the environmental, the objective data from the toxin, and we also have blood biomarkers as well. So walk us through how you think about it and what you're teaching practitioners at Toxins University.
Well, and I did ask Jen's permission to talk about this ahead of time because my first responsibility is to her as her practitioner. So, and she was like, it's fair game. Let's do it. So just no HIPAA's being violated or anything here.
Yeah.
But this is like so poignant because we have all lived this before, right? Michael and I lived through like 11 exposures. It's real, man. It doesn't necessarily, the last one doesn't necessarily make you smarter. So I just love that you're willing to have this conversation, first of all, and I give you all kinds of credit, Jeremy and Jen, for opening up, your world to other practitioners so that everybody can help people heal faster. Yeah. The first sign to me that we needed to run a fresh total tox and to look at the environment was Jen wasn't healing fast anymore. She was in a state of like resilience for years after we worked together, and she was like bebopping around the globe, living her best life, killing it, and super diligent on the things to maintain her health even in this toxic world. And then she had a exposure that caught her attention that was very short term, but the impacts lasted. And to me, that's a big red flag for somebody who's very healthy and takes care of herself well. So it's like, okay, let's start looking for why that might be. Let's run fresh labs. So that's how this conversation actually all started. It was a short-term exposure to construction in an environment, in a hotel that was known to be moldy. I think we were all in this hotel at the same time, actually, now that I think about it.
And ironically, it was a Cellcore conference.
Yes. I wasn't going to say it, but yeah. So the hotel was under construction, and it did. It stank, you guys. It stank of epoxy. We knew that hotel was moldy, like poor Jen. We all went through it. It took me 2 days to recover, and she was still not feeling well weeks after. Mm-hmm. So there's always a range, right, of resilience. Other people didn't even notice it. Great, good for them. I'm going to keep this PG. So we ran her total tox labs She worked a protocol, right? But she had to work at it hard. And she was more histamine sensitive than she had been in the past. It's like, can you blame COVID? Well, when you think about COVID exposures, people have become in general more histamine sensitive since then. That's interesting. But also, we went from we introduced 5G, which has a totally different impact on the cells. So we are more histamine prone if you're going to say things that are totally talk about being in their nascency of being understood. We are just now seeing those first studies come together, and we're going to be learning about 5G years into 6G and 10G and all that. Like we're gonna have to play catch up for a long time. So it's not just that. We had to look deeper. And she reran her tox labs a few months afterwards when we were thinking, why do you have to play such a perfect game in order to be well? And we could see the mold triggers, the mycotoxins on her test should have gone down further by then. Just because we've run thousands of these now, like we knew, like, you're working it hard. You're like, we call it like in the green lane. Like on our campus, we have color-coded lanes for people because they're so brain foggy. So that's how they read their protocol charts. She's a green laner. And these numbers should have gone down by now. It's time to test the environment. So that's how this all started. Jeremy, from your perspective, where would you like to go next?
Well, I think the how you would unpack what the right approach is. And so the reason why I kind of went down here is, from a practitioner's perspective, it feels overwhelming for all of this data, right? But how do you kind of put it together? And I have the genetic pathways related to mycotoxin clearance here, but right. I got, obviously the information. So we ran the same test side by side, and my ochratoxin A, I do no coffee enemas. I do none of the work. I do none of the ozone. And I had half as much ochratoxin A as she does. So maybe talk through kind of how you think about that. I think you mentioned your color-coded pathways. Oh, we just lost her.
Where'd she go?
But yeah, so I guess we'll wait for her to come back on that question. But how do you think about it, Brendan?
Well, I'm glad to see this because, like, to me, I have a hard time with like the disconnect in the data. So to me, the only way we can even effectively navigate is like crunching it through Nexus, where we can see all of these, right? Because it's easy to kind of like feel that temptation of, let's blame it all on the MTHFR, this specific SNP, or why are they not excreting here? But it's this kind of correlation that I think we can navigate. But I'll throw it back to Sinclair now that we have her back with us.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting here is like you've got some key variables, but it's only part of the picture. So we want to acknowledge the like there's some interesting correlations, but we also want to make sure we're not giving too much credence to this data without some missing layers in place. Like no human is their lab. A lab is only a window into their physiology and their current capacity to perform certain functions, right? That's why we run so many labs, so many type of labs, and so often, because they each have their job to do. But like even a DNA report, like to Brennan's point, I think that was really well said. I only got the second half of it, but I liked it. We want to be intentional here and make sure we're not overpromising what DNA can tell us, because each person has just 4 to 5 million SNPs, like not that many, right? And what we're doing in like a report that is commercially available to us is looking at maybe a couple hundred. And then we're obsessing about, say, 10 of them that we know can impact detox physiology. But when you look at someone like Jen versus Jeremy, this is like so cool that you guys are willing to do this right now, because this is going to make every practitioner listening a little bit more oriented here. We have a couple of key factors. First of all, while you live in the same home and while you work out of that home together, you have different offices in it. And so your micro environments are really different. Her office versus your office, the air quality, not just like, hey, I found the same species of mold in both of those areas, but what's the airflow in each one? And how many hours a day did you spend in it? Also, Jen has a different health history than you that has nothing to do with your DNA, which is, she's got, as a woman, like any woman, lots of us spend lots of time on birth control, which absolutely affects glucuronidation and our body's ability to excrete mycotoxins independent of our DNA capabilities. And she shared that publicly, so I don't, and I asked her extra special permission before this, so I know that's okay with her to say. But that is going to affect her health history. And when you look at this, like, this has been going on for a while. You guys have had multiple exposures, right? Some of your earliest data on this, for example, is from 2016. Well, she spent a whole 10-year period of her adulthood or more on that birth control, and it absolutely affected her liver's load. And so I'm assuming and accounting for that in her, like, ability to store it in the tissues. Also, because she's a woman and she's got these reproductive cycles and a tendency towards appearing estrogen dominant. We know mycotoxins are super estrogenic, especially the ones she's been exposed to. It's going to confuse her body, and it's going to encourage it to try to hold on to extra lymph, for example, and try to protect her reproductive system in a way that simply doesn't happen for a man. And then she also has a history of, Hashimoto's, skin cancer, all of these things that she's lived into. So even though you guys live in the same home and you both work out of home together and often travel and stay in the same hotel rooms together for work, we're still like, these are the other layers in my mind as I'm looking at this DNA stuff. So I love DNA as a layer of info, but I also, the people that come to us and say, hey, can you look at my DNA? And it's the most important thing for us to do. I often find that they get stuck right there and they try to use it as their reason to not take action. And that's the part that's devastating to me. Like, talk about an era of, or a scientific frontier that is in its nascency. Like, we really do not want to pretend that we understand DNA right now. Like what Jeremy's doing with Biocanic right now, for example, and helping us correlate across whole patterns of people, DNA with these other labs is really important fundamental work. It's going to take years to keep unpacking those insights. We're still at the beginning. Like, do you want to share, Jeremy, just really quick, what you did with the autism and the mold piece for context for people really quick?
Yeah, I mean, so we worked with Purdue University Precise Health Solutions, and they knew that they were improving the behavioral scores of autistic kids, but they didn't know why. And so they enrolled 36 kids and ran a wide range of testing, everything from genetics, microbiome, food sensitivity, blood chemistry, mycotoxins, heavy metals, organic acids, and I know I'm forgetting something else. But they took their behavioral scores at the beginning, did the testing, and then 6 weeks later retested. But the only intervention that they actually used was getting them onto an organic whole foods diet that was gluten-free and dairy-free. And one of the things that really stuck out like a big red flag was that their ochratoxin A, they were all gluten sensitive or some form of gluten intolerance, but they all had elevated ochratoxin A, and just eliminating the processed foods brought ochratoxin A down, and their behavioral scores came up. So it was inversely correlated, meaning the change in ochratoxin was directly proportional to the improvement in their behavioral scores. And so those types of insights aren't really well known, but we know ochratoxin is a neuroinflammatory. So it's probably, just to your discussion around Jen, it's just yet another, like a little like knife cut, right? And all those knife cuts add up. Like, you can survive 1, you can survive 3, but you can't survive 50. And I think that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's actually really well said. That's a really easy way for a practitioner to think about this. So what other thoughts do you have that you want to unpack together, the three of us, about your journey? Like, where are you at in the journey right now, Jeremy?
So we are awaiting a building inspector to come down and actually look. So we have no active water leaks anywhere, but there is some sort of residual reservoir that needs to be addressed. That's probably being, there may be humidity issues, crawl space issues, attic issues, all that other stuff. And so that's kind of the holding pattern that we're in to get to the next level. But it is interesting, the different symptomologies, between the two of us in essentially the same environment, with one person being completely focused on health and detox and the other person half-assing it. But I guess maybe kind of coming back to kind of the practical application. So, setting aside the environmental stimulus, like how do you how do you recommend that practitioners get started with people in terms of prioritization from a supplement intervention, all other things being equal?
Yeah. So are you asking about like protocol elements to get somebody started on a mold detox?
Or no, just if they're just toxic, they have a full toxic burden, right? We could definitely throw 25 supplements at them.
Super toxic.
We could do ozone. There's modalities. We could, give them coffee edibles while they're taking supplements all day, right? But it's not really feasible. So how do you break it up and make it actionable that a person can get quick wins on the board, start to feel that symptomology improve, and want to stay motivated?
Right. Yeah. Because compliance is everything, right? Like, I know Brendan knows that. Like, we could do so many fun, nerdy things with you, but we know you won't tolerate too many. So we have to prioritize here. Well, it's like, I was teaching a course this morning actually on the oligoscan and heavy metals. And on the page 1, it shows you, and by the way, you guys can do this through Biocanic and track all your stuff in there through Biocanic, but it shows you, your minerals, like what is actually able to be measured in storage in the body, in the cells right now. And you can see this person's really depleted in zinc. This is the depletion side of things. This is the excess side of things. That center line is like the happy place, right? It's really threading the needle. So she's mostly a little depleted in a lot of things. And then she's got some key deficiencies. One of the most important things I said to the class is, do not go out and order one of each of these things that you are low in. That is where functional medicine fails. Oh, I ran $5,000 worth of labs from you, or just like function, $500 a year gets you, you have to drain half your body in blood just to get to the reports. That's a lot. And then you get so many confusing and competing recommendations because you look low in everything. So it's like, oh, you're low in 37 markers. Here's 37 supplements. Like that orthomolecular approach is really just the green pharmacy. It's a pill for every ill, instead of asking the body, hey, you look like you're having some absorption issues. Is it that you don't get exposed to good quality food, or that your body is actively getting blocked from digesting and absorbing it and getting it into the cells? Let's look at the other labs and take a closer look. So it really is all about prioritization. And it's not like we're going to take every single one of these heavy metals that is showing up for her that she's really high in to excess. Like, oh, and now you need a binder for every single one of these all at the same time at once. And oh yeah, we ran your total toxin. You have 11 different molds. So that'll be 11 supplements as well. It's actually the opposite. We're trying to be as elegant as possible. And remember, elegance in science is the least number of steps or number of elements to get to the desired result. That's what scientific elegance is. So that's what we're aiming for here. And lucky for us, that's all about what, it takes for compliance too. So we're looking for early wins and early stabilization. We want to stack the deck in our favor. So I know people coming to us, even if they're oriented towards this paradigm and, they want to have an active conversation about toxins and they're worried about them, it's not really that fun. And it ends up being expensive and mentally exhausting. And they're already tired. So we're doing a little bit of that detective work in each session, right? After that big first info dump of labs, but we're really still obsessing about early wins in the first 90 days. So it's a lot of nervous system support, like to Brendan's point this morning, where he was talking about a lot of people come to him for mental health concerns, right? How do we stack the deck in our favor with nervous system support when you can see all these heavy metals or molds or both in their labs that are like, ooh, these are all really hard on the nervous system. So whatever their compensating and stress behaviors are, they're coming out immediately. Whenever there's just a little bit of stress, they're going straight into overwhelm, right? And what we know about those toxicant exposures is they're going to rob the body of enough energy to do anything about that. So we front load with nervous system support and mitochondrial support and some stabilizing minerals and drainage. And then we get into the detox from there and start, once the gears are moving, then we can speed them up. But we know for sure, just to pick on mold for a second, it's really good at disrupting the glutamate versus GABA relationship, right? So that's really important insight into how they're doing. We're getting more awareness about like histamine, for example, which is great. And certainly Jen is a great example of somebody who wasn't histamine sensitive before and has become that. But that's variable depending upon how many stressors she has at any given time. You know, she can get away with stuff, quote unquote, at a very different level if she's not under stress environmentally or life-wise, that she wouldn't be able to if she was in an environment that was toxic in that moment, right? That's how we can all like eat like crap when we're on vacation, you know, or have an extra glass of wine. It's like that, but you know, times 10. Yeah. So we want to think about these inflammatory compounds that the body sets off when you've been exposed to these irritating toxicants. So what I hear people doing in the functional medicine world that is very, it's a good step in the right direction, but it's also really scary is to hear practitioners say, well, we're living in a toxic world, so I just kind of account for that. So I run my blood work and then I love the oat test. I'm really comfortable with that. And maybe I run like a Dutch and that's like enough information. Like they don't want to detox and they're not ready for that. So I just kind of like, I'll throw in some liver support. Well, which kind of liver support? Because if you're flowing glutathione onto a moldy mess or, you know, somebody full of heavy metals from their amalgam fillings, you just put a huge mobilizer in play and there's nothing to catch that. So yeah, you're going to see nervous system on fire and a lot of inflammation that you didn't have before, or their energy is going to tank. So not all liver support is created equal, and every toxicant has its own mechanism of damage. So the source of exposure matters. Did you breathe it in? Did you eat it? Right? Or, you know, and then the mechanism of damage that's happening systemically and at the cellular level, and which detox pathways does it impact? So that's why we're front loading so much with nervous system support and energy support that is tolerable, right? Before, and then easing into drainage and detox. So I was going somewhere with that, but I forget where. What was the question?
How do you make it actionable for your clients?
Someone else want to jump in for a minute?
I actually have a quick question in this. So some people may not be familiar with the LEGO scan. So I got my tox panel back. My mercury is low. My environmental toxins from Function Health, AKA lead and mercury, 2 markers, are low. But when I took the LEGO scan, I was flagged as high for mercury. So how do you, when you get that discordant data, like, and I think I know the answer, but I think it'd be good for you to say, okay, what do I really trust, right? I'm getting serum, I'm getting urine, I'm getting stool, I'm getting a LEGO scan. Like what is your order of your hierarchical belief order, I guess?
Yeah, well, I mean, I want it all because I'm a glutton, but you know, unfortunately, when it comes to looking at toxicants, blood is the least informative because blood is like your body on its best behavior because it's circulating and it's pushing, you know, nutrients out into the tissues. Your body's going to do everything it can to kick toxicants out of that as soon as possible. So the issue with testing like for lead in blood, for example, you're only going to see lead that has just come out of bones because bones are breaking down. This is like more interesting as you age, sure. Or you're looking at an immediate, like an acute exposure in the blood. But it's very fast. It's a short window. Like it's not clinically relevant most of the time. Well, instead, what we need to look at is what is in storage, or what is your body in a position to excrete, and compare the two of those layers of information. So serum is not a great way to test for toxicants. So why I like the Allego scan is because it's showing what is in storage, what is not immobilized. You know, so because you're scanning not just serum, but which you are catching, but also the lymphatics, a little bit of fatty tissue, and also bone. So it's more information. And it is photospectrometry, but you know, like most scans are based on that tech right now. So could you poke holes in it? Sure, of course you could, but every lab or scan has its limitations. So I like comparing the two. And what you said, Jeremy, is super typical. Remember, mercury vaporizes at room temperature and above. So it's insane that we would put amalgam fillings as like standard of care into the mouth when they're half mercury by weight and volume. And we know for sure that half of that vaporizes into the body in the first 7 years the amalgam filling is installed. So that's crazy work, guys. Like, what are we doing here? When that happens, you have to remember that the statistics show us that about 80% of that mercury stays in the body because it's so hard to excrete. We did not evolve with mercury. Yes, it's abundant in the Earth's crust, but it wasn't like available to us in the same way that other minerals and compounds were. So it's deep in the Earth's crust, so we now mobilized it, right? So what does mercury do once it's vaporized? Well, it gets absorbed into the gum lining, for example, just to pick on amalgam fillings, because over 100 million Americans have had them or currently have them. So it's like, okay, we have a 1 in 3 chance of this being relevant right now for everybody that walks in your room as a client or patient. And then once it vaporizes, easily getting inhaled and crossing the blood-brain barrier with ease and storing in there long term. You must have glutathione and melatonin to flush out the lymphatic system at night. And that is your opportunity to get the mercury out of the brain. But then where does it go from there? It's really, really hard to get it through the lymphatics, out into the bloodstream, down through the liver from there, because it's so easy at any point along that journey to get reuptaken back. And again, in vapor form in the body, crossing every barrier with ease. So even if it makes it out into the bile or the urine, chances of it getting reuptaken through an organ lining while it's sitting in the bladder, just waiting for you to get to the restroom, it's still a possibility. You know, that is a clinical possibility. It's just a clinical reality. So very little of it is going to make it out through natural excretion. You're going to have to bind it or provoke it out. And it is a long-term process, which is annoying, but you know, that's mercury for you. So being lipophilic, it will hang out in your adipose throughout your body, but it sure has an affinity for the brain. Also hangs out in the thyroid, and it does hang out in the liver as well. And every heavy metal has a different set of behaviors. Like cadmium, also lipophilic, but hangs out in bones. Lead hangs out in bones because it turns that same key that calcium does, right? But also likes to hang out in the brain. And a little goes a long way, guys. It makes you dumb. It's at any age. So I'm really fun at parties. I know I'm like such a Debbie Downer, but we're just going treasure hunting, guys. We're going to find these opportunities. We're just going to prioritize them. It's just a project.
I like the distinction.
Where do you want to go from here?
You made on like something that kind of stood out to me about that was
we can talk more about prioritization. What do you think, Brendan?
Yeah, I'd be curious on that because like I like the distinction of you know, like blood, urine, you know, and I won't go off about like HTMA right now, but this idea of like what's floating around in the blood is reflective of like tissue status. And this is where, like, you know, whether we're measuring, you know, mercury levels in the blood or calcium levels in the blood or, you know, vitamin B6, you know, measuring something circulating is kind of the best we can really do. But like calcium's a great example where it's completely regulated by, you know, parathyroid hormones. So it's not that the blood level of calcium is really reflective of like how much calcium is in your bones or how strong or dense your bones are. So like to your point, you know, with some of the heavy metals that might be sequestering in tissues, or I think a lot about the adipocytes and the fat cells of like, you know, let's say somebody is, this is fun. Like somebody's, you know, super toxic and then they get on a GLP-1 and now they have like rapid weight loss and they're releasing whatever toxins were stored there. You know, it just, you think through some of those components. So yeah, I'd love to hear more thoughts on like, you know, your prioritization, which I did like the, you know, kind of nervous system regulation, you know, mitochondrial support. Those definitely seem like kind of key players in that equation. But yeah, kind of the prioritization and sequencing, I'd be curious to hear more about.
Yeah, so one of the things we want to be intentional about is like reducing sources of inflammation as fast as possible. So like the first thing we try to get them to do before we even get them to assess their house, because we don't want to tell them how much work it is up front, because that sounds scary and hard and expensive. Let's just get them to take a fresh look at their water source. So many of them are drinking straight from the tap if they're drinking any water at all, or they're drinking from a Brita filter and they are not aware those claims have been disproven, or how incomplete that filtration process is, or God forbid they're drinking from their fridge because they think that's filtered water. And it's, those fridge tubes are notorious for molding. And it's just like, let's make life easier. Let's get some cleaned up water in play. Are you willing to drink spring water? Let's look at your water filtration. Are you willing to distill? Because that's a key component for people. Let's stop getting poisoned. So source of water and making sure that it's actually absorbable, whether that's adding in electrolytes, or if the budget's really limited, just a pinch of salt so that it's easier to absorb that. Because like to your point earlier, when we're dealing with multiple competing toxins, we know, for example, mold is super dehydrating. So what they are trying to ingest to try to compensate for that is usually sugary drinks that are caffeinated because they're so depleted, or they're just obsessing about water, like all the girls run around with their Stanley cups on Instagram, and is it even really absorbable? So we want to make sure that it's absorbable, clean water. And we want to make sure that we're taking a fresh look at food, because like you were saying about earlier about food choices, and how easy it is for people to like get scared of that once you start introducing the concept of toxins. We see a later stage client often that's already orthorexic. They've already been trained into fear about food from multiple sources. And so, I'll have a guy come in and he'll be like, don't touch my food. I'm on the Luke diet. And his name is Luke. It's like, I've got 11 foods that I can work with here. And it turns out, unfortunately for Luke, that more than half of those are highly inflammatory for him. But he has trained his nervous system into, these are my comfort foods, right? Or I'm thinking of the sweetheart who's like, she's a tech exec, like she's so smart, but she was down to 3 foods. And one of them was organic applesauce. She was really, really high in patulin on her total tox labs, like really high. Patulin is known as a mycotoxin to show up often in apple-derived products. It's not the only place it shows up, but it's worth the question. And this was like pre-digested food. This was like baby food, like she thought she could count on, right? Because her gut was such a mess. And so that was a really tough conversation to have with her. Do you think, yes, it's organic applesauce. I love that you love this small label. I love that you think that you look forward to this every day. And do you think they're using the most fresh apples for that applesauce? Or could they possibly be the old dinged up moldy ones? What do you think? Is this worth an experiment? You tell me. And so, yeah, like that she felt actually a visible difference in reduction in her symptoms by getting off of that. So even for people that have like whether they're early stage of like, what do you mean you want me to give up my pizza and beer? Well, how about the weekends? For those guys, it's one style of conversation, or even all the way at the other end, full-blown orthorexia, being afraid of food, health obsessed, very limited in diet. We still have to have this conversation of, hey, would you like to heal faster? Because if you would, it doesn't all have to be about supplements. We can actually pinpoint some overlooked sources of inflammation in your food that you actually thought you could count on and that were safe. And that's okay. We're just going to take a conscious pause from them for a while. Just a break and see how much that helps. Because again, we want to front load, in our favor here before we ask the body to detox or speed up detoxing. Body's always detoxing. You have to remember that, practitioners, how you use your language is everything, because you're in a position of authority. They're coming to you and they're trusting you, and everything you say gets in and stays in a way that it doesn't in a peer-to-peer relationship. So please be very careful about your words, whether you're talking about somebody's DNA or, their lab work right now. Like, this is the picture we can see right now. To bring it back to what Jeremy was saying earlier about the DNA piece, like the most devastated people we have ever had in our office are people that have run their DNA and decided or been told by a practitioner that DNA report means they can never be well. and that worse, they've given that to their children. So that's not true. Like, we know that there's so much more that we can measure and reduce and support. So it really does come down to low-hanging fruit and prioritization and thinking about it in terms of stacking the deck in our favor.
Awesome. I think those well said. The language factor, that's something like I didn't have as much appreciation for, considering the practitioner language as a clinical variable, right? Like that I think that's something that comes with experience, right? Because I learned it firsthand of, okay, if I explain the lab result in this way, that sounds scary. Like, now they're anxious. What do you know? Versus like, if I explain, and something I say to my students a lot is kind of like, I think this is so true. I think in our line of work, there can be a really fine line between like identifying a healing opportunity where there is one versus like creating a problem where there wasn't one and didn't need to be one. Like, more data is not always better, like outside of like a controlled research setting, but which is why I like research so much, because like we don't have unless it is like a blinded placebo controlled study, like we don't know exactly what's causing what. We can see the associations, but trying to prove the causal, like how do we know that that toxin is causing that symptom or this and that, right? But you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater and be like, oh, toxins just don't matter and we don't have the long-term data. It's like, well, yeah, we don't have long-term data on seed oil either, but we're not going to ignore it, right? So I don't know. I just really appreciated that point of considering the language as a clinical variable that's going to influence their trajectory for better or worse, right?
Yeah. So with the last minute, Sinclair, do you want to just quickly introduce Toxin University? I did put a link in the chats for people to learn more, but definitely give a quick rundown.
Thank you. Yeah. So I was on the speaker circuit. I think it was just last year. Wow. We've been doing a practitioner mentorship every year for years, just about root cause resolution. And, it's been one of our favorite things to do each year. But I kept saying on the speaker circuit last year, stop being general about your detox decisions. You have to take yourself to Toxin University, meaning go do your own research, go obsess about it. This is now your full-time job. And people don't like that. Practitioners are like, no, just tell me what to sign up for, because I don't want to make that for myself. And I'm like, oh no, I have to make it. So that is actually how Toxin University was born, as many practitioners actually in your community here in Biocanic gently, lovingly, loudly demanded it. And it's been a real joy. So it's a year-long certification that takes people through all the different toxicant classes and all the different mechanisms of damage as taught through every system in the body. So you can navigate it by body system. Hey, I have a thyroid client. Which ones would be impacting that? How do I prioritize for a thyroid client? Versus, oh shoot, somebody's coming in with a known mold exposure. How is this going to translate into their health? I don't know. And all the best in class tools in this time, and what are the other relevant companion labs. So this is for practicing practitioners only, both board certified and licensed. We have everybody from FDNs to surgeons and everybody in between. Of course, a lot of chiropractors, because they're really curious, and RNs and DOs and those guys. But it's been fascinating. And I think, I don't know why I'm surprised, but I am, that how fast the community has like gelled in there and how intense they are about it. And I think it's because we designed it for the working practitioners. They get immediate case study help, ongoing. They don't have to wait to the end of the year to get certified. So it's like the linear knowledge they need to feel comfortable and grounded in the current science, emphasis on current, to Brendan's point, because we do need to be so mentally agile. Thank you, Brendan, for calling that out. And also just practical hands-on community and support through tough cases all the way along while they're getting their sea legs with root cause resolution. So yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Well, listen, I know you have hard stops, so we'll wrap this up, but I really appreciate you being here. And for those of you that are watching as a replay, feel free to post comments. We'll make sure we'll get those questions over to Sinclair, and definitely check out Toxin University. We got the links posted up there. So thanks again.
This was so fun, guys. I could do this all day with you.
Yeah, we'll have to do like a part 2.
All right. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Brendan, see you next time.
You see, brother.
You too, bud.